To put your new machine stand together, cut the straps first so that you can separate the box top. Lift the box top up so you can see the contents. Once you've removed the box top, identify and separate the components for the table. First is the shelf, which will be screwed in and positioned underneath the main table, and your two legs. And then inside the smaller box that comes inside the main box, you have your hardware kit, which is your connecting screws and bolts. And then two cross braces. This one goes along, the smaller one goes along the bottom, and the wider one goes along the back wall of the stand, as we'll see. Finally, the tabletop itself, which we'll now set upside down, preferably on a soft surface so that we can begin installation, so that we don't scratch up the tabletop itself. To begin assembly of this stand, start with the legs. Determine which leg is the front and the back. You're looking at the front part of the stand here, and you want to find the back part of the leg. On either side of the leg, you want to look for these two holes here. This will hold the cross brace that's on the back of the leg. If we flip that over, you can see there are no holes. So this will be the back of the leg. So that would locate this as the right side leg here. So, and you want to position them on the outer hole set that you can show here, that's shown here, and you want to take two of the wider washers themselves and the two longer bolts, and let's go ahead and pre-position the leg itself. Make sure you start each screw by hand. We'll use the wider washers, and just hand align the table leg to the hole, and start it with your own fingers. Using power tools can cause you to accidentally cross-thread the screws. And once you've got them started by hand, we can tighten them down. So we'll go ahead and they should slide in nicely, turn nicely, until we've gotten all the slack out of that. And we'll do the same for the other side. Once we've installed the legs, the next thing to do is lock the legs in place. This stand is repositionable to different heights. By sliding the legs up and down, you can adjust the stand to your desired height. If you don't have any preference, we do recommend that you put this at the shortest height possible, especially with the heavier machines. That gives it a more stable base. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of tap this and just make sure that that's down to the lowest position. Do that same for the other side, and we're going to use these locking plates, and we want to position this so that the bend is toward the outside, and you can see there's a contour in here that fits the contour of that plate. And we'll also put that in place with, again, our 13mm screws and washer assemblies. And we're going to do that on all four positions. You've got two positions on each leg. So again, go ahead and put these in by hand. Taking care not to cross-thread any of the bolts as you're inserting them. The other locking plate goes here. And again, you'll do the same for the other side. Now once you've gotten the legs installed, let's go ahead and time to install the cross braces. So first we'll turn this around. I've rotated the table to the back position so that you can see the back of the legs with the two holes. And what we'll do is go ahead and take our rear cross brace and align that with the legs. And we're going to use 4 13mm screws with the already attached lock washers and washers. And start these, go ahead and start these by hand again as always. That way you can feel and make sure you're not cross-threading them. Once they're seating and turning nicely, go ahead and tighten them up and snug them up by hand. It's okay to go ahead and take all the slack out of the screws if you can, as much as you can reasonably turn them by your fingers. Next we'll install the bottom cross brace. So line this up with the legs, and you can position this anywhere you want to. As a suggested position, we try to make that flush with the front edge of the legs. That gives us a little bit of a shelf that we can use, that you can use optionally, so that you can store boxes here as well. Best thing to do for positioning is try to align the edges or the ends with the outer edges of the legs themselves. For the attachment hardware, we're going to use these rectangular locking plates, and they go underneath the ends of the plates, and they're secured by the 13mm bolts that are used throughout the rest of the assembly. To get a closer look at the way we do that, we'll take the rectangular locking plate, slide it underneath crosswise into the channel of the bottom part of the leg, and align that as square as we can, and position that put that in place with your 13mm screw and washer assembly. If you have a larger washer to spare in your kit, try to put a larger washer here as well. We'll also do that for the other side. As a final step for assembly, we're going to install the shelf on the underside of the tabletop. To do so, you'll need 4 of these threaded bolts, and what we're going to do is we're going to insert them at the 4 corners here, are the 4 holes that are again inboard of the legs that'll act as a support for the shelf. To start out with, again, these are 13mm nuts, so everything can be tightened down with a single type of wrench. Is you want to go ahead and start inserting, threading a nut on both sides of this, about 1.5 inches on both ends. Again, carefully hand threading so that you don't cross thread this, until you have 4 of these like this. So about 1.5 inches in on both ends. Next step, once you have these threaded, take one of your smaller washers and the threaded bolt itself and start on a corner. Lay down a washer and then go ahead and hand turn your threaded bolt until it comes to a stop, and tighten it as much as your wrist can reasonably do so, and we'll tighten that later. And then go ahead and take your nut at that end and hand tighten it against the washer, and do that for all 4 corners. Next, once the 4 supports are in, let's go ahead and put 4 more washers. Take 4 of the smaller ones and turn them, put them upside down onto the nuts on all 4 corners. And these will help hold up the shelf. So we'll take the shelf, flip it over, and then align that on the 4 bolts assemblies that we put together. And as necessary, adjust the nuts on the bolt so that you have just enough of the bolt sticking through that you can put a large washer on top. So we're going to finish this off with 4 large washers. And 1 nut, and to give them the same adjustment, or the same height, adjust the nuts so that they are flush with the ends of the bolt. That gives you a common starting point so that you have the best chance that the shelf is at the same height on all 4 corners. And not only that, but you're maximizing the amount of space between the shelf and the bottom of the table for better storage. So hand tighten your nuts as much as possible at each corner. At this point, we're ready to tighten this down. So we'll use a socket wrench with a 13mm attachment. First, tightening down the bolts as evenly as we can, the nuts as evenly as we can. Make sure you don't over torque your bolts. A good socket wrench can put a good amount of pressure on the bolt. However, pay special attention to the table support stands. Get support bolts and make sure that they're nice and tight. Taking care not to miss any of the bolts you've installed. The structural strength of this stand comes from making sure that all of the bolts are tight. Since all of the braces, once tight, will give you better support, they serve to support each other and give your Happy embroidery machine a nice, long-lasting stand assembly. Once put together, your stand is ready to receive your Happy embroidery machine.